Well, welcome to this month's BCE, particularly for those of you who are coming to join us for the first time. Thank you for coming to choose to be with us for today. Um, and we'll sort of explain the program in just a minute, but essentially it's something we do every month. It's just a way to immerse ourselves back in this work, give ourselves just a sort of an eddy in the swirling river of our lives to just pause and reflect a bit on our own
Yes.
growth. Um, and we're in the process for this whole year of looking at the notions around trust. Um, and so we'll explain more about that.
You're on mute, David.
Dave, you just muted yourself.
What happened? Ah, all those brilliant things I just said. I have to say them again.
That may have been me. I was muting other folks that
Yeah,
got
I think so.
happy fingers. Sorry.
You're welcome. It doesn't, yeah, anyways, it doesn't matter. So if I were to summarize what I just said, it was a welcome to everyone. And this is our free monthly call just to showcase kind of what we stand for, what we believe in, what we try to support others for. The entire year is focused on the topic of trust. And we started out looking at trust in ourselves, and we're going to spend the next 4 months of our sessions looking at trusting others. What I was about to say before someone pointed out that you couldn't hear me was that you're always welcome to put anything in the chat box that comes up, comment, question, curiosity, awareness. It's sort of our running sort of dialogue of what's happening for you all out there in the group. And Karen will do a great job as always, sort of bringing that forward. And then, yeah, so I'm just going to put up the slides. And again, particularly if those of you are new, if you've got questions, feel free to ask them. Where you'll discover it's a very open and generous space. So here we are. All right, so let me just get this to work here. There we go. Okay, so like I said, we're going to focus for this entire 4-month period on trusting others. You'll see that we've got a sort of a core model that we use every time for our guided practice. And we're going to do it a little bit differently than we had done it, in that we're going to focus only on one of the 4 sort of phases at a time. This one has to do with letting go. So much of our life is shaped by the sort of consumerist mentality in the world that we swim in and work in, which often leads us to want to acquire things as a path to growth. And one of my observations over the decades of doing this work is that actually a lot of our growth starts first by letting go. And so the question, which will make hopefully even more sense when we move into the content, but one of the things that we've focused a lot on in narrative coaching is the characters in our clients' stories. How they come to be there, what they represent, what they might be wanting or saying to us in terms of how they came to be in that person's story. And so we're going to use that frame to look at your own narrative about yourself, who you think you are, how you think you need to be in the world. And is there an element or a character in that narrative that might need to be composted? And you'll see more in a minute why we use that word if you're new to this, but in order for you to be able to trust others more or in a more mature fashion. And we've got a really unique way to kind of get at this today. So I'm really looking forward to that. This is a bit of orientation again for those of you who are new. So we're going to have, they're not really technically quarters. What do you call it? A third of a year? I don't know. But we're going to have 4 months, and each one's going to focus on one of the phases of our breathing model, which also reflects a lot of the model in narrative coaching. And then that will leave us with 1 month at the end. In December, we'll kind of reflect back on the whole year and just see where we each landed around trust in our lives. One of our continuous presences in these sessions is this wonderful yoga pose at the ocean, and this opening line. So often in a lot of what we do, we're given a curriculum, or we give other people curriculums. We go to school and have curriculums, and those are all sort of determined by the teacher, the professor, the trainer. And we sort of invert that in the way we look at development, and we look at our life as our curriculum, and this moment in time as our curriculum. And so rather than us trying to project our curriculum onto the world, which does have value in many ways, but oftentimes the biggest breakthroughs that people discover or encounter come from engaging a moment in time in a different way because of paying attention to what's it actually pointing out or asking of us or challenging us for, helping us to see maybe in a new way. And so it allows us to be able to learn and grow in any moment in time. So, so again, there's some things that we'll share today, but most of what you'll gain, in my experience, will be your own encounters with yourself and each other in ways that might surprise you across the day. So to get us into the content for, are there any questions from anybody particularly that's new to us that you want to ask for right now? Good. All right. So we have a little quiz. So you have one of four choices. And so recognizing that we're all complex human beings, and you probably could find part of yourself in each of these four, but most of the time, particularly if you're under pressure or something is making you uncertain, like conflict, which of these tends to be most like you? And so when you kind of have read through and kind of discern which one is most like you most of the time, just start to write down that number, then I'll explain what each of these represents. Okay. All good? All right, so now the big reveal, what these stand for. Here we go. All right. So these are, you got them? Okay, so these are all, why is it not doing this? There we go. So these are the four primary attachment types or attachment preferences. And the two at the bottom are the most common for people and or points in time where we don't feel so secure. So attachment is a biological imperative in an infant in order for them to feel safe and secure in their relationships with caregivers. The patterns that we evolved from that early time often have a profound impact on how we relate to people for the rest of our lives, up until such point as we actually do work to make it better for ourselves. So most adults feel secure most of the time. When we don't feel secure, the more common types would be anxious and avoidant. So anxious would be often people that have an uncertain or unpredictable relationship with their caregivers when they were young. They're always sort of seeking others to kind of reassure themselves or get connected, and they're not quite sure how that works, and they keep trying. But they're very, often very other oriented that way. And avoidant types tend to be more self-contained, more uncertain about reaching out. It's just easier to do it yourself, kind of. And And then fearful are ones that often comes from a place of trauma or challenges around caregiving. And they often have struggles in both of those realms. It's important here only, I mean, I could say a lot about this, but it's important here only because I want to help us begin to look at when we find ourselves in a place where we're not sure whether we should trust or not, or whether we feel like the trust is broken or not quite clear or secure, what do we tend to do? And so some people tend to avoid trusting because they are afraid of being hurt or let down. Other people are always chasing after trust because they're not quite sure and as grounded in themselves all the time. All of these are fine because they're all natural human adaptations to get our needs met. So none of these are bad or wrong, they're just different. And they point to things about ourselves in terms of what we do in order to get our needs met and how we tend to default, particularly when there's things like tension or stress or uncertainty, or what do we tend to do to try to find our way back to feeling secure again. Okay, so I'm just going to stop there for a second, and I'm just going to take these slides down so I can see you all and ask. We could spend the entire hour and a half doing nothing but talking about that slide. But for now, do you have enough of an understanding to kind of for us to move forward and move into the activity? And or is there anything else you'd like to know or ask about for now? And I see Colleen's got her hand up.
Thanks, David. I'm curious, is it possible, and people don't always pigeonhole great 100% into a box, but is it possible that one can feel any of these
Yes.
contextually, depending on
Yes.
the situation? Okay.
Yeah. So we have people that we trust and know that it makes us easier for us to come from a secure space. When we're in a place where we feel weak or threatened or challenged or in a bad mood or whatever, then it's harder. We have to kind of work at some of that. And like I said, we're complex human beings and we have all four of these in us all the time. And depending on the relationship, the nature of the situation, how we're feeling that day. But most of us tend to lean towards one when we don't feel secure. We have our kind of a go-to strategy that we use to try to get our needs met. Yeah. And so one of the classic ways you'd see this in a relationship is that when there's one person is struggling or has a need or something, and so let's imagine that person tends to be more avoidant. They just want to be left alone to go figure it out. The other person's more anxious. Oh no, they're abandoning me. They don't need me anymore. And then they might kind of move towards. And then you have the classic chaser and chasee dynamic, right? Both people are making efforts in ways they know how to get their legitimate human needs met, and they're making it harder for the other person to be successful. And so a lot of what attachment sort of restoration is around is learning to stand still, being aware of what's being activated in us and making new choices. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions before we move into the activity? Yes, Helen.
I have a quick question. So, I feel very much secure, but that's with having done a ton of work on myself from my mid 20s to in my 60s. And I can see definitely I was avoidant when I was probably in my teens/early 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The time can often help, especially when you make conscious effort to address things. One of the things that makes attachment work both powerful but also can be challenging is that, like with trauma, the memories that shape our attachment patterns are precognitive, pre-narrative. They're just embodied experiences. And so we often have these patterns and we're not aware of them until somebody points them out, or we go to therapy or coaching, or have a dear friend, or you finally have a healthier relationship that allows you to kind of, work on yourself. But but time
Okay,
does help.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Karen.
So my question is, in reading these 4 options, is there, so as I'm answering the question, when trust is not clear, what do we do?
Yeah.
So let's say if I chose one of them but yet it doesn't completely express what I would do.
So these are distinctions. So they're going to be sort of the epitome of these descriptions. They're not going to cover the whole gamut of our human nature. And so we might have a hybrid of a couple of things, or it might change in the course of the conversation. It's mostly just I'm putting this here as a setup for our activity for today, which we'll explain in the next slide. But it's just a way for, out of any of this, to begin to look at when I feel that trust is at stake, or I'm not sure. So, for example, I have a long-running client, and there's a huge opportunity for us to do a pretty significant piece of work together. And we had been planning on it for 3 months, and then all of a sudden, I didn't hear from him for 5 weeks. So if I was coming from an ungrounded, anxious state, I would probably be just pestering him with emails every other day. Are you okay? Where are you? Why aren't you talking to me? I go into all this highly agitated state. Or I might say, oh, see, you just can't trust these kind of, you could go to some other story. And so one of the things I've learned for myself is to come back to and this is Helen, you might be alluding to this, to come back to a grounded space in myself and say, what do I believe is true? And then and also, what do I know about this client? So this is a highly avoidant client who has a sort of law and engineering background, and likes things to be figured out, likes things to be determined, likes things to be ready, likes things to be perfect. And so I thought, I bet you he's just sort of stewing on this, trying to find out the optimal way for us to work together. And this isn't about me at all. And lo and behold, that was true. And so when I came back to my secure sense of self, I thought, we've been at this for almost 2 years working together. I have high reliability that it's a very trustworthy person. And so any agitation that is happening for me emotionally is mine, has nothing to do with him. And lo and behold, we connected yesterday, and everything's brilliant. But you can imagine the journeys you could go on if you didn't come from a secure space.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back to share the screen here for a second.
Lenny is raising her hand.
Oh, there you are. Hey, Lenny. Maybe not.
Lenny, were you raising your
Yeah,
hand?
okay. I didn't know if you saw my hand. Thanks.
I did not.
A
So,
couple
but
of things. I was looking at my own style when you were presenting it and feeling like 90% of the time, number one.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed, and this kind of builds on what Karen was saying, that over time, I'm becoming just more selective with not who I trust so much as who I share my energy and attention with.
Yeah.
And so it feels like it's an evolution, but I don't want it to become avoidant out of lack of trust. It's just about boundaries and bandwidth,
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It makes total sense. So when we feel secure, we have many more choices we can make, and we have much more consciousness we bring to our choices. And so you might deem this situation is not one in which it would be in my best interest to trust too much. Um, and yeah, and so we become much more discerning about how we spend our energy and our time. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share screen again, and I'd like to be able to make sure we have enough time for our conversation. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do, so the piece at the top is just sort of our mantra every time we meet. Pay attention to yourself, observe yourself, take care of yourself, and speak for yourself. So these are the four sort of things we're going to bring into our practice. And we use the same practice sort of process every time, but we do something a bit different with it. So for this one, this sort of guided practice, I'd like you to think about a situation either recently in which you wrestled with or are wrestling with trusting another, or it could be a group of others. We find that sort of having something that's live for us in the practice makes it much more valuable. So some place where you're trusting, there's an element of uncertainty around trust. It could be trust of yourself, could be trust of them, could be trust of the situation, but just something where you're kind of wrestling with questioning this idea of trust. And then as we move into the practice in a minute, I would like you just to imagine that that person or persons is sitting across from you. And start to notice what happens when you imagine them sitting across from you. And so I did this myself a couple of days ago with the client I was going to talk to yesterday. I imagined him sitting across from me, and that's when I just really relaxed and said, oh yes, there's a deep trust here. And I was just getting agitated and a bit pissy because he was taking forever to write back. That was all about me, not about him. And so rather than worrying about where is the trust or how much this trust is there, as you imagine this person or persons sitting in front of you, there's a field, an energetic field that gets constellated, like, oh, I'm starting to feel uneasy, or I'm starting to feel excited, or I'm starting to feel, and just sort of notice that out in the space in front of you. What are you sensing, feeling? What are you telling yourself about trusting them? Just, again, don't try to analyze it in your head. Just notice what emerges. Like, oh, I feel myself leaning back, or I feel my stomach tightening. Just starting to notice what emerges when you imagine this person that you're kind of wrestling with sitting in front of you. And then if anything about your attachment preference comes into play here, I'm going to ask you to just to think about that and see what it might say in terms of informing you about what is happening for you in this experience. And all right, everybody got this part so far? All you have to do is just hold something in mind, imagine the person in front of you, imagine the space in front of you is being populated by all that's emerging around trust, and then we'll see what emerges from our guided practice, okay? All right. So for those of you who are new, this is our practice, and we're just going to focus on number one for today. So this is all recorded, so you can actually watch this back later. You can also download this practice from our website. But for now, I'd like you just to close your eyes and allow yourself to just to settle into your chair or wherever you are at the moment. So as we begin our practice, just notice your breathing. Again, nothing special to do here. Just allow yourself to be aware of the fact that your body is breathing you. And as you relax into this, you might wiggle your toes and feel the ground if you can. Just allow your back to settle into your chair so you feel relaxed and present to the practice. from this place, I'd like you to now conjure up the image of the person you were thinking about or the people you were thinking about sitting in front of you. And there's a field, a space between you. And just for a moment, notice what happens for you as you draw your attention to this person sitting in front of you, for whom or with whom you're sensing a wrestling around trust. And as you sit here in that experience, ask yourself what it's reminding you of. Is there a pattern in play here around trust for you? Is there a story about yourself or about trust that's at play here? What do you notice yourself doing or wanting to be doing around trust with this person? Do you find yourself leaning in, or maybe leaning out, or maybe you feel paralyzed, or maybe you feel agitated? Notice what comes up for you as you wrestle with trust in the person in front of you. So as you do this, some of this might feel very familiar to you. You've been here before. If that's true for you, what part of yourself is showing up again? It often shows up at times like these. For me and my story that I shared, there was glimpses in this last month of distant memories of being abandoned. And it was that part of me that was anxious about whether he would call again. And when I calmed that part of myself, I trusted that everything would be fine. What shows up for you? What part of yourself is coming to center to be in this moment with you? What do you notice about that part of yourself? And as you begin to imagine what you might want to do to address this wrestling in a different way, to get more clarity or confidence about trust, what would you have to let go of? So maybe it's the need to give other people more power. Maybe it's the need to understand everything perfectly before you can act. What would be helpful that might have served you well at one point in your life, but may not as much anymore all the time? What might you be invited to let go of here in yourself? And as you think about this and sit with this, you might just pay a little extra attention to breathing out. When we let go of things and release things, there's a natural tendency for most of us to sigh. Sigh is our body decompressing, releasing, breathing out. So as you, with your out breath, just notice, is there anything else that you're being asked to maybe let go of? Mhm. And in our process, we think about the idea of composting. So when we let go of things, they don't disappear or go away, they just get repurposed. maybe there was energy you've spent a lot of your life using to be brave all the time. And it was hard for you to sometimes ask for help. So we're not asking you to get rid of bravery. We're going to be asking you to repurpose your bravery in service of leaning in as opposed to leaning out. And so the energy that was once stored standing guard can now be released to move towards what you actually want. But for now, if anything has come up in terms of letting go or breathing out, what would it be like to compost that and use it in a different way? And then lastly, as you move through this, what are you discovering about yourself and maturing that part of yourself such that you could approach your situation with more trust? All right. So Karen Weatherford, would you be so kind as to put people into breakout rooms?
I'd be happy to. And while I do that, JC just joined us unless he popped off and popped back in. If you wouldn't mind just giving a little intel of where we're at.
Yeah, sorry for missing so much, but I thought I would just come because it was on my calendar. I'm JC. I get to spend some time with David. Hey, David, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
And learning more about this community and myself, and so wanted to participate more.
All right. Great. Welcome. So if we could put them into groups of about 3 for 30 minutes. Okay. And just share whatever you feel is important for you. And again, this is a living experiment with trust of what you choose to share and what you choose to hear, how you choose to be in your small group. Okay. You all set, Karen?
All set, ready?
All right.
And
Oh, question.
yes,
How long will this be? I have to leave early at the 0:00. How long will the breakout be?
30 minutes. Yeah,
Mhm.
so you'll have to leave a little bit before it ends.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'll
yeah.
And
just
just tell
type
you,
it.
And
just-
Andy, we have groups of 3 and Darcy just joined us, so I'll try to put her in with your group when we go.
Awesome.
All right?
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, give me a second to see where you're at and then we'll do that. Okay, off you go.
All right. All right. I want to put up a question briefly just to kind of guide our sharing, but here we go. So kind of the purpose for, I'll let you read this and then it's a lot of words, I know, but so the premise is just trying to understand ourselves and what sort of mediates or moderates our ability to trust or choose choose consciously how we want, how much trust to give. And so part of that is we form habits and patterns around that, around our trust of others or trust of self. And so some of that is just the conversation today was around what might need to be composted in that may not be as necessary as it once was in our life, and allow us to start seeing some things more clearly. So given that, I'm just really curious, like, what did you notice about your experience that feels important to you? I don't need the pictures anymore, so. So again, you're welcome to put things in the chat box, and or if you want to speak, you can do that as well.
Could you ask the question again, David?
I doubt it, but I'll try.
Yeah,
uh,
and I just put it in the chat as well.
there we
So
go.
it's already
Yeah.
in, and here's another way of looking at it. I'm also adding into it. So
Yeah.
there you go.
So we're just looking at what you discovered about your narrative about yourself related to your attachment preferences and what that says about how you trust or don't trust, or when you trust or don't trust. So I'm just curious about what you noticed about your sharing and your conversation that was important to you. Or you get new insights about yourself. Oh, there's Sophie.
Hi, David.
Hello, I just saw you there. Good to see you. Wow. Yeah.
I love the composting.
Yeah.
I love the composting metaphor, David.
What did you like about it?
Well, I'm currently actually doing a massive composting project at the moment in my garden. But yes, it's just that both a combination of, enrichment and using old material, really.
Yeah.
I like both those things.
Great. Oh, good to see you. Somebody else was sharing or going to share?
Yeah, David, I was.
Oh,
Jessica.
yes, Jess,
Yeah.
yes.
How are you all?
Doing well.
So I was reflecting with my partner. She had to go, unfortunately, Nanette. Just how for early on, I was very much more avoidant, very independent. And while that served me so well for so long, over time, I've shifted and changed for sure.
Mm.
And the experience of you leading us through that exercise somatically helped me shift, especially with that exhale, especially with that moment to get more in my body. And, the epiphany for me a little bit was I'm a producer. I'm literally and literally and figuratively, I produce lots of things. And so the level of control needed to produce
Mm.
shifting into curiosity, from control to curiosity,
Mm.
from avoidant to secure, right? And
Mm.
I'm also a coach, so that coaching has always allowed me to embrace much more of the presence and of the curiosity, which is a huge part of my soul, and yet equally as fierce and part of me is this producing part. So Nanette and I talked just a little bit about how we loved you talking about the field, the
Mm.
space. And that too became then the playpen for us to see each other and be present,
Yeah.
both in that envisioning exercise, but also in the breakout. So that's a mouthful. I'll pause, let somebody else jump in.
Thank you. Miriam.
While I was speaking, I was noticing the shifts in who I'm being, and that my trust is in myself, and my trust is in people are going to show up whichever way they're going to show up. I can't fix or change any of that, and it has very little to do with me and more to do with their narrative. And the shift is, in the past, I'd be worried or concerned, or I'd have all these stories, if, but, when, how, and all of that. And so it's like, and I never understood this term, but what is it? Committed, but whatever the results are, not attached to the results.
Right.
And I see that more and more and more about myself. And it's funny because I just had an incident with my grandson, and I was like, he doesn't want to be with me. And I started to laugh. It was like, oh, really? He wants to be with mom, or he wants to be with his friends. And like that bothers me more than a client. And because it's so personal. And I laugh about it. So I get to see and observe my own narrative about everything, and trust myself more in terms of sitting back and going, let's see how this plays out, rather than shifting and forcing how it turns out.
Yeah.
So thanks for the exercise.
You're most welcome. And what comes up for me is going back to where we started the session about this sort of represents the sort of situate part of narrative coaching, which is all about what is. And so what I hear in your story and some of the stories already is a lot of this is just quieting ourself and these characters in ourself that want to rise to the occasion and do something. I've got to, so that something in the production cycle falls apart. Well, I've got to step in and I got to go do that. And you got to move into that mode and you think, like what is actually happening here and what is really true? And ooh, I have this great team. I bet you they could probably take care of this. I don't have to get myself all ramped up about this. And so part of it is just, and why we use the breath as the orientation point in our full circle is coming back to a place of discernment in what is being asked of me now and how do I want to be in this now? And what about this is about me and what about this is not about me at all. Yeah. Per.
Yeah, well, you stole the good stuff right there.
Okay. I was just reading your mind.
Yeah, there you go. Like thanks. Well, when we were doing the breathing exercise, I just thought it was curious that we had other on the seat across from us, right? So when we were doing the breathing exercise, I actually had myself on the other side.
Okay.
And so it was great to work with the people that we have. Michelle, I'll just call you out, was actually like the first to say like, hey, why don't we actually discuss what we mean by trust first?
Mm-hmm.
Like what are we all packing in there? And so it was really fun, even just with the three of us, just to watch all those satellites around trust to see like which got the priority and then like how that might move a little bit depending on what the context we put it in. So anyway, I just wanted to call that out and say thanks for the exercise, thanks for the group, because it really at least brings to the surface that there might be different elements of what we're calling trust that are important. So.
And it brings up something too around. I've been debating all year long whether or not I ever want to provide a definition of trust for these conversations, and I've mostly decided no. And I could be persuaded otherwise, but because each of us is going to find our way to our stories about trust and what trust means to us, and I've got definitions I've used when I used to teach in MBA programs, but all seem so pedantic now. And more important, because we live in a time of low trust in many scenarios, and trying to figure out who to trust, what to trust, when, just is a question that maybe Bobby took for granted much more often before. And so for me, I thought just staying in the dialogue together about our own experiences of trust or lack of trust or broken trust, I think in the end will reveal what we need to find. So is there anybody else who'd like to share about their experience or what they heard or said in the breakout room? Yeah, Sandy. And then I'll come back to you, Marion.
Yeah, for me, I think, my typical kind of default is secure.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I'm not secure, it goes to avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm currently the coordinator of hospice care for my father and managing a very large group of siblings, coordinating, scheduling, who's going to cover, who's not going to cover. And so something came up that just this morning that, made me realize this is an issue that is more me than what actually happened. I have a sister who's doing overnight PCA kind of work, which none of us want to do. And so we can't do it without her, but she has some challenges. And so part of what came up for me, and I really appreciate the reminder of composting because it's not just giving it away or throwing it away, it's just repurposing it. Is for me, it's the piece of letting go of composting control, because I don't have control when she's there and I'm not. So we may do things differently. I might not like the outcome, but I can't control the outcome. And I do trust her. I do believe that she is doing the best that she can. And so, you know, this, of course, as always, this is perfect timing, you know, because it just happened this morning. And as in the ID way, it always happens when it needs to happen, you know. But I just really appreciated being able to process this in this way, because it was very helpful. And for me, the composting is composting that control when there is no control. And I do believe and I do trust that she's doing the best that she possibly can, and it's going to be different than the care that I. So that's what came up for me.
Great.
So,
Wonderful. Yeah, I think I think one of the things that I always I notice in this process is that when we allow ourselves to mature our sense of trust, it actually enables other people to do the same if they so choose. And I just, in the last couple of weeks, I've got similar dynamics in my own family and of origin, and watching as I've pulled away, because I'm usually the one that is asked to step in and do all that because I've whatever, and kind of recognizing that they don't trust themselves as much. And so I thought, but what if I just like back away, but show that I care? And now they're all like rising to the occasion. Again, it's not how I would do it, or, you know, it's different, but it's like they're finding their own voice. And then that's allowing me to free myself up to not be the one that sort of keeps putting my hand up. So it's very much about the relationship and how we shape that relationship, and are we open to surprises in that relationship to explore the boundaries of trust together. So Marion.
Yes,
And
thank
just to
you.
say, we have Ron, and then Kent also raised his hand.
Okay.
Too.
Thank you.
Find Marion's little Hollywood Squares segment moved, so I had to come find you again.
Oh, thank you. There's an image that I keep getting of each individual, and it's not a picture of them, but it's sort of like an energy picture in which there are lots of integrities and holes, places that can see through. And as I'm speaking of this, I'm thinking about, oh yeah, and I'm one of them too. I'm thinking about the sensitivity with which we approach each other and how important that is, and how sort of leading with compassion for what might or might not be is a really important piece of the equation.
Yeah.
To allow people to, one of the phrases that came in our little group was I was just hearing it, that being the best that they can be, doing the best that they can. Sandy, I think you were talking about that. Yeah. So anyway, something like that.
Thank you, Marion. Ron.
Well, I thought it was a great exercise. I thought the compost was very interesting in that concept. And for me, I thought about the fact that because of my attachment style and things that have happened growing up, a lot of things that are good, like kindness, for example, or helping others, have really just served as to be a protective fence or armor, so to speak. And it's time to maybe compost those and let what flow in more fully, but it's still kind of, it's a process. It's a step.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
is.
So
Yeah. I, I had an interesting synchronicity many, many years ago, Ron, to that effect, that just sort of on a whim, I took a test and got accepted into the Mensa Society. And then a few months later, I was nearly killed by a giant truck that ran a stop sign and had a concussion for months and months. And the juxtaposition of those two events was just stunning. And I realized that out of that, I realized how much of my identity was at that point in my life was attached to being smart. And then all of a sudden I wasn't smart at all. And then I had to, in the process of regaining my cognitive capacity over about a year, it changed my whole perspective on what actually mattered to me. And a lot of this is just trying to help us be more mindful of things that are still a part of who we are and still are important to us in many ways. And service, I can imagine, is very much part of your value set, Ron. And now you're saying, there's other parts of me that might want some airtime, some chances to blossom in my life. That if I didn't have to protect some of those, maybe other spaces in myself. So. All right. Somebody else had their hand up.
Yeah.
Ken, that's it. There you are.
I was just gonna say if you'd asked me 10 years ago this same question, I would have genuinely thought I was pretty solidly in the secure camp, if you will. And now I'm arguably a lot, I would say that I was not very secure back then, or it was not as secure as I would have even thought. And now I'm arguably considerably more secure, but yet I'm far more aware of the other ones and their prominence in my life, their ability to slide in and out depending on what's going on. And so it's all a process. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so as we close out for today, I just want to invite you, if you've anything else you'd like to share in terms of how your conversation with the person in the chair across from you seems now, or anything about trust that feels different for you now. Yeah, Lenny.
Thanks, David. Yeah, the exercise was very profound for me. And the takeaway for me was, in the breakout room, one of my partners mentioned this dynamic where when somebody is in their avoidant mode, or in my case, an aggressive, angry mode, the fear of the break affects us in different ways. And for me, the impetus, and the same for this other person, was to blame ourselves. What did I do wrong? What do I need to do differently? And during the exercise, I saw a recent situation where my habit was there, and I also stepped out of it for the first time, at least first time I was conscious of stepping out of that in the moment. And the breathing really helped and all of that. And I hope I can sustain it, but it was shifting into a real awareness that I'm not responsible for how the other person feels. I'm not responsible for how they express themselves. I'm only responsible for my capacity and my boundaries. And my capacity includes being able to hold their behavior and let go of it, in terms of, again, of it being my responsibility. So I have a lot of practice to do, because it's not natural. That habit is such a deep part of me. So the question I would leave with is, how do we compost again?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking Indy had to go, Indigo had to go, but she made a comment in the chat box, which I think was really quite helpful is learning to be with people that well, even without trust. And I think about, for me, for any of us who are drift towards the avoidant style, one of our gifts is compartmentalization. And which is, again, a distracting, distancing, less mature stance sometimes. And it can be really helpful when it's composted and repurposed. So for example, if you're with somebody for whom you have low trust, you can separate them from trust from behavior and see them as a human being, have compassion for them, have connection with them, all the while being conscious of some of the boundaries around trust. If you can't compartmentalize, it all gets kind of mushed together. And then you end up not responding to any parts of that well. So again, in whatever we bring to this, there are gifts. And part of the work is not to get rid of the gifts, but to repurpose them and make them more mature. All right. Any final thought? Okay. Thanks, Andy. So we do these every month. These are all recorded. So if you register, even if you can't come, if you register, you'll have access to the video. And we encourage you to bring friends. This is one of our most enjoyable things we do at MI. So we're glad to have you here and hope you'll come back and see us again next time. And we'll talk some more about trust. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.